Konnichiwa. Welcome into Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Please use our code SICK'EM10 when you check out for Texas's finest Wagyu beef. SICK'EM10 will save you 10% on that order. Top 5 CFP sleepers. Now, I went through each of these for a reason, and a sleeper is not someone like Ole Miss who hasn't won the SEC. A sleeper is not someone like Tennessee or FSU or Clemson or almost any team in the SEC, although our number one team is an SEC team. But sleepers are teams that are just outside that realm that if everything goes right for them, then they could sneak in to the top 12. Number 5, NC State. And look, I got to compliment these guys on the GIF here. Look, this is good O technique right here. You pick the fattest guy, he's the O. That's what you do. Take it from a guy who, in this scenario, would be the O. And you can't have a problem with that. It's being proud of who you are. Body positivity at NC State. Way to go, guys. Anyhow, NC State doesn't play Florida State, Clemson, or Miami this year. So they have a great shot of being this year's Louisville, who had to play none of those teams on their way to the ACC title game. And will only have to play one of them at all, whoever is in the ACC title game against them. So if they can pull off that one win, in addition to what is a very favorable schedule on down the line, NC State could very much wind up winning the ACC or finishing a strong enough second to, if there is an elite ACC team, to force consideration. Now, I'm not dumb enough to think that that's probably not going to go to another SEC or Big Ten team, but NC State could sneak in and could win the ACC because really, if they are as good as they appear that they're going to be, especially with Grayson McCall coming in at quarterback, they have to beat one of the premier teams in the ACC, and they don't have to do it until the championship game. So it really is just going to come down to that one moment if the regular season goes correctly for them, and NC State could very much find themselves in the top 12 and in the college football playoff, even as ACC champion. Number 4, USC. Now look, they're probably, let's go through the Big Ten right now. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, like those are the top 3. Penn State's gonna have a very favorable shot at it. And then you kind of get into the USCs and Washingtons of the world because USC has a lot of unanswered questions. How much better is the defense going to be under D'Anton Lynn? Is Miller Moss the next Lincoln Riley project that proves worthy? He's had one really great bowl game, but that's hard to judge. But again, this is a Lincoln Riley coach team, and Lincoln Riley wins a lot when he has the things that he needs. We don't really know that he does at this point, but if he does, I trust Lincoln Riley to win a lot of games, and USC is in the Big Ten and a big enough brand to where if it comes down to them and say NC State, the second-ranked ACC team, then who are you going to take? They're probably going to take USC. Number 3, Boise State. This is, them and Memphis are my G5 teams that I think are probably going to contend for the playoff, but they've got a favorable schedule. They've got Malachi Nelson, who transferred in at USC, probably starting at quarterback, probably the most athletic guy they've ever had at that position, but he hasn't played yet, so we don't know. But if Malachi Nelson is as good as his recruiting ranking says he is in the Mountain West, that's going to be a big deal, and Boise State finished the year very strong last year, and I think they could pick it up and certainly wind up being the G5 team that makes it. Number 2, let's go to the Big 12 and West Virginia. And before we do that, let's talk about this guy for a second. He's having the time of his life, but I'm just going to tell you that this night either ended really well for him, where he hooked up with a girl, or that's the last time he's been between 2 girls in the same place at the same time. So this is kind of a one-shot deal. It might work for you once, but you can't do it over and over again. Just a pro tip from someone who's been through it. But West Virginia, they're not picked by most people in the top 4 of the Big 12. Like, I could have put Oklahoma State as a sleeper. I don't think they're a sleeper based on the fact that last year, had there been a 12-team playoff, they would have been in it. Same goes for Kansas with Jalen Daniels, and certainly the same goes for Utah and Kansas State, who are widely picked by most people to be the 2 favorites in the Big 12. But West Virginia, the way that they finished last year, the fact that they've got Penn State on the schedule, they've got opportunities to pick up big quality wins along the way. And if they do that, and if they are in the Big 12 championship game, which I think they're a dark horse for that based on what they have coming back at quarterback. They should be solid on defense. Their offensive line is veteran. They've got a good running game. All of those things, if everything goes right for West Virginia, don't be surprised if they're in the top 12. I know that they're probably the team in the Big 12 with the most wide opinions on of, oh, they're going to be good again, or no, they're going to be terrible. All these things, and I think this could be a very sneaky good year for the Mountaineers in Morgantown, just because of the veteran leadership they have coming back. Neil Brown is always out to prove something, and I think he has to prove something to his own fans a second year, and I think he's looking forward to that. And number 1, Texas A&M. I don't think that they, I'm going to say this right now. I don't think that they will be in the college football playoff. The thing about A&M is, if everything goes right, is a huge thing that very rarely has happened to them. Usually, amazing things go right for them. For example, they'll beat Alabama, but then they'll lose to a 500 Mississippi State team on the road. Those are the things that kind of define the 7-5, 8-4 nature of Texas A&M. But I'd think this. They have a roster that's still pretty talented, even given the mass departures that they had via the portal, losing Walter Nolan, Evan Stewart, and people like that. But they refilled it really well, and they got more guys who are worker bees, which is kind of what they needed, and they can get back to their personality. Anytime A&M tries to beat Texas or tries to beat Bama or tries to beat LSU, it blows up in their face. And that's kind of what Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher back-to-back were doing. You don't have to be them to be elite. You can be yourself. That's why in their pinnacle under R.C. Slocum, even though those were in the Southwest Conference and early Big 12 days, they were themselves. They were built on defense, they were built on attitude and that wrecking crew, and they were efficient on offense, and they would get big playmakers in there over and over and over again, but they were not trying to be something they were not. I also think Colin Klein's addition to the offense as the offensive coordinator will be very good. You'll see a very different offense. Connor Wigman's a really good quarterback. They have very efficient wide receivers. The running game's going to be good, and Mike Elko will have that defense playing well. Plus, as the SEC schedules go, they don't really have that tough one. They got one kind of in the middle. And if they can beat Notre Dame early on and then maybe upset Missouri in the middle of the season, then really it kind of comes down to, can they beat Texas at the end of the year? Now, that would be a nightmare scenario for Texas, although it probably wouldn't keep them out of the playoff. But if they can find a way to beat some combination, 2-1, against Notre Dame, Missouri, and Texas, and maybe LSU, so 2-2 out of those 4 games, then I think you can see a Texas A&M team that at 10-2 would be widely considered for a playoff run. But this is also Texas A&M, so you can beat LSU. You can wind up beating LSU by 10 and then losing to Auburn a couple weeks later. That's kind of how their story goes. But again, this is if everything goes perfect, and for poor Reveille here, that's very rarely happened. But they could certainly be a team that is in the playoff, again, if everything goes perfect. This has been the Top 5. We're back to wrap it up right after this.